Hi guys, welcome back to Flower Class with Helen and Olivia. My name is Madison and I'm going to be teaching today's workshop, which is one of my personal favorites. This is the garden roses class. So lots of beautiful varieties of garden roses that we are going to be working with today, a few of which are some of my personal faves. So I hope that you guys enjoy class. We're going to make something really beautiful. So earlier today, we delivered to you guys a bucket of beautiful product. You also had received a bag inside which we have this really pretty metal vase. So go ahead and fill that with water. I've filled mine to about an inch or so below the baseline. So you can fill it with just clean water. Doesn't need to be filtered or anything. Totally fine to use tap water. And if you do have a packet of flower food handy, you can certainly add that as well, though it's not necessary. Also inside of your bag, you'll have a formula sheet. So this gives you a really good idea. You can follow along and kind of see the different ratio of flowers that we would use to put together a completed arrangement. And then also you have a piece of chicken wire. This particular piece of chicken wire is quite substantial. So we're actually going to cut it down and you can definitely save the remaining bit for another arrangement in the future, or you can recycle it as well. So the first thing that we're going to do, I'm just using clippers, but if you do have wire cutters, you can certainly use those as well. And I'm just going to cut this piece of chicken wire in half. Just cutting my way down. And then I'm going to take the square that I cut and I'm going to kind of scrunch it up into a ball. So I usually will fold in half and then fold in half again. And that creates a nice little dome shape that I can then go ahead and slide into my vase. So no particular way that I'm doing this. I'm literally just kind of shoving it in, and it's going to look like a little bit of a mess inside the vase. But what we've created is a nice apparatus that is going to hold all of our stems in place. It's going to keep things from shifting, and it's going to allow us to be really intentional about where we're placing our flowers in the arrangement, and everything is going to stay intact as we continue to add more floral. So this is a wonderful tool. Highly recommend saving your extra little bit of this, and potentially if you enjoy cutting from your garden or picking up flowers from the farmer's market, would definitely get a roll of this to have handy in your kitchen sink, because it's a really great way to pretty easily elevate your designs. All right, so we've got tons of really incredible floral that we're going to add into our piece today, but we're going to start by laying a little base of greenery. And we're using a couple different types of greenery today. I'm just going to pull all of them out at once. And I may leave a few sprigs behind for the end, and look for little places that have holes. Just make sure that you can still see the greens after we add all the floral. So I always like to leave 2 to 3 pieces of greenery behind to add into my completed arrangement, the very last step. So the first thing that we're going to pull out of our bucket is this variegated little leaf pit. So it's going to be kind of a hybrid between white and green. So looks like this. Love this for its color. The variegation is going to give it some nice depth to the arrangement. So it's not going to look all like one. It's going to give you some variation. And I particularly like this type of greenery because it has almost like this frilly texture to it. So if you look at the leaves closely, it's like almost like a ruffly edge, which is going to make our piece look really interesting and beautiful. So love this. We should have a few pieces of this. We actually are calling it Phyto Nigra, which is, it's more scientific naming. But in the shop we usually just refer to this as variegated little leaf pit. The other thing that we are using today is, I don't really know how to pronounce this. Naigi is how I say it. So this really beautiful green foliage. This is going to give some contrast with our lighter foliage. So again, introducing more depth. It also has a really beautiful kind of vining characteristic to it. So it looks really beautiful, kind of cascading over the sides of our vase. So really loving both of these different types of greens. So I'm going to start with my variegated pit. And you may have some different looking pieces. You may have some pieces that are really robust where there's lots of smaller bits jetting off of a single central stalk. You may have pieces where it's very linear and honestly, all of the greens are kind of just concentrated together. These pieces you can use as single pieces. The bigger, more hardy and robust pieces we're going to cut into smaller pieces of greens. So let's start with one where maybe all of your green is kind of collected on a single stalk down the center. This is obviously a little bit too long to put into my arrangement, but I'm going to cut it in half. Or really you can cut it, I cut mine here where there was kind of a break in that green. So we are going to start by cutting up a bunch of pieces of this, and then we'll go ahead and add it after the fact. So for our more robust pieces, we'll begin by, you can just remove any long jutting off pieces. So a couple of these guys, I'm just gonna kind of go my way around, removing some bits. And then when I get to the top, rather than sticking this huge bushy piece in as one piece, I'm gonna just cut the center away. So I cut away the central stalk. I'm gonna use this as one piece, and then I'm gonna use this as another piece. So if we put that entire thing in, it would just be really overwhelming in the base. And I want to make sure that this is kind of sprinkled throughout the design, not having like a huge dense cluster of it. And then for my last piece, whatever style it is, it's either going to be more dense or smaller. You'll cut that apart. So now we have a nice little hefty stack of this pit. I'm going to go ahead and take one of my more robust pieces. Let's see, I've really broken these guys down, but my first piece, I'm going to get one piece kind of on all. So let's see, we have 6 sides to this base. So you can see there's 6 little flat sides. I'm going to get one piece on each of our 6 sides kind of coming out. So I'm just going to snip off maybe an inch or 2 off the bottom of the stem. And then I'm going to go in at quite a bit of an angle like so. And I'm going to work my way around each of the 6 sides, and I'm going to get a piece of green kind of coming off of each of these 6 sides. So this is just helping. I'm just using these 6 sides as a way to help kind of spread the greenery so that it's represented on all sides of the arrangement. So I'm just working my way around, getting one piece on each side. There we go. So now I have a nice little outline. The entire outside of my vase kind of has a little bit of this greenery. I'm going to take one of my pieces and I'm going to get it kind of up top in my arrangement. So a really great way to kind of see how tall you want to make your arrangement is I'll usually take my thumb and pinky finger and I will measure my vase. So my vase is about this big, and then I'll use that measurement, and that's how tall I want my arrangement to be. So right about here is a great place for the peak of my arrangement to be. So I'm going to take one of my pieces of this pit and I'm going to get it up top. You can notice that I'm going at slightly an angle, so I'm not going straight up and down like a flagpole in my arrangement. I'm going to cock off to either this side or this side. It doesn't really matter, but I just want to have one that kind of marks out the top territory of my arrangement. So get that guy in there. And then I mentioned earlier, I want to leave 1 or 2 pieces of these behind. And if you do have any pieces left, you can go ahead and just kind of put them between the 2 levels. So I have the top level up here and my bottom level's down here, and I can just kind of put 1 or 2 pieces between those. So no fancy way to do this. I'm literally just kind of building out a nice little shape. I'm going to begin by putting in my white hydrangea next, and then we're going to revisit with this different type of greenery. So we'll begin by taking out the 3 full-size hydrangeas that you have in your bucket. These guys all have a protective shield on them, so just go ahead and pull down on that to release your hydrangea. You'll also see that your hydrangea all have some really beautiful leaves on them. I love hydrangea leaves. I think they add some beautiful, it's a beautiful way to kind of frame out the face of the flower. The leaves tend to stretch beyond the face of the flower, so the leaves kind of tend to reach out past the white part of the flower. So they create some nice depth in the arrangement. So we're going to begin by placing our hydrangeas 1, 2, 3 around the outside of our vase. So my first hydrangea, I'm going to, the way that I measure how long to keep my stems is I will kind of situate my hydrangea where I might like it to be. So I'm wanting this hydrangea kind of sit over here, and then I can clip my stem where it looks like it's going to hit the bottom of the vase. So I just went ahead and clipped my stem right here, as that was where it looked like it was going to hit the bottom of the vase. And then I'll usually give it an extra inch of a snip because I find that's just a little, ever so slightly too long. And then I'll go in at an angle, and you'll see the hydrangea is just going to kind of spill over the side of the vase. With that said, I like the way it looks kind of folding over the side of the vase, but it's very secure. It's not, sitting out like this, falling out of the vase. It's very secure, but the way that the flower kind of leans, you can see that it does get kind of some fold over the side of the vase. All right, so next up I'm going to shoot for my second hydrangea kind of in this area over here. So we'll measure that hydrangea up, give us our stem a nice snip, an extra little bit, and then the second hydrangea is going to go in on this side. And you can see that a lot of this greenery is kind of peeking out amongst the white hydrangea, but because the base of the flower is so large, it does kind of cover up some of the greens, and that's why we're gonna leave some behind to pop in at the end. My last full-size hydrangea is going to go in on this side, so I can give this guy a nice cut and then put him in here. There we go. All right, so honestly, I think an all hydrangea piece can be quite beautiful. The one thing I would recommend if you're picking up white hydrangea and you just want to do white hydrangea in mass, it's really excellent to pick up mini green hydrangea as well. They help to kind of block out your hydrangea. Excuse me. They'll help to block your hydrangea out so that they all look like distinct flowers and everything doesn't just become one big cloud of white. So next up, we are going to pull out our 4 mini green hydrangea. They look like this, and they also have that protective baggie on them. So just go ahead and pull down to release. They're also going to have some leaves on them, and I'll show you guys how to decide how many of those leaves to leave on versus how many to remove. So generally speaking, I love the look of hydrangea leaves, although they do require water to kind of stay nice and green and looking pretty. So I want to remove anything that isn't kind of framing the face of the flower out nicely. So these top maybe 4 to 5 hydrangea leaves really do a beautiful job kind of hugging the face of the flower. Anything below that, I'm just going to remove. So we'll do that kind of test on each of our hydrangea. Last one there. Okay, so 3 of my hydrangea I'm going to use between, kind of down low between these hydrangea, again, to kind of make sure that they don't all start to become just one big blob. So my first hydrangea, does not matter which one you grab for, I'm going to get it in between these 2 hydrangea over here. So I'm using the same measuring technique, giving the stem an extra little cut, and then I'm going to pop this mini green in between my 2 full-size hydrangeas. So I'm going to turn it so I can see what I'm doing, and then I'll turn it back. Okay, rotating my vase, I'm going to put my next mini green kind of over here. There we go. And then my final one I'm going to put in this little area over on the side, building that last hole between my hydrangea, my full-size hydrangea. The last mini green I'm going to put up top in my design. So I really want, this is a very strong green color, and I really want this to be represented on all sides of my design, but also like a different height variance. So for my last mini green hydrangea, I'm going to pop it in somewhere up top in my design. So you can hold your hydrangea up. Similarly to our greenery, we don't want it to be straight up and down in the center, but cocked off to one side. And then this last mini green, I'm going to snuggle into the top. So just to give you guys an idea, it's just kind of like hanging out up the top. Okay, beautiful. So you can still definitely see some of my pit kind of creeping out between these, between all the hydrangea. But the last little bits will kind of sprinkle in at the end to make sure that they're still visible. All right, next up, we're going to revisit some of our greenery. So you can see that these guys are very obviously kind of like great pieces to cut apart. So I can just kind of cut these full pieces into many smaller ones that I can then use at various places throughout my design. So that is what I'm going to focus on doing right now, is I'm just cutting these up into some smaller pieces that I can introduce throughout. And this may be more than what we actually need. So I'm just going to go ahead and start with a few pieces, and then I'll leave a few behind in this pile of greens over here to put in at the end. So I want to have some of the pieces kind of flowing out of the bottom of my design, and then I want to put a couple pieces kind of coming out of the top. So I'm going to start with maybe one of my top pieces. So again, orienting it off to one side rather than straight up and down in our piece. But maybe I'll get one or two up top in this design. Just kind of like turning the vase as I go, sprinkling a little bit in up top. And then I'm also going to get a few pieces that are kind of coming out of the base of my design. So closer to the bottom, and I can tuck these under a hydrangea. So you don't necessarily need to look for cracks between two blooms. You can also nestle some of this green underneath your hydrangea, like so. So now I'm just focusing on getting a couple of these pieces of greens kind of on all sides of my piece. And again, you don't need to feel like you need to put all of this greenery in. You can definitely leave some behind in our pile of greenery over here. Okay. All right. So next up, we are going to start with some of our garden roses. So we're going to be using, I think we're using 4 different varieties. And so I will kind of point them out, and then we can put them into little piles, and then we'll work from there. So the first one that you will notice is your Patience, which is a really beautiful kind of creamy ivory colored rose. So I'm going to just take those 2 out and put them together. The next variety that you'll see going down the list is our Juliet. This is one of my absolute favorite garden roses. It's the peachy colored one. So you'll see that the petals along the outside are a lot more of a pastel peach, and then the core of the rose is more of like a apricot kind of color. So super, super pretty. Pulling these guys out, and be careful because they do have pretty intense thorns. All right, next up, we have one Constance Garden Rose, another one of my favorites. This one almost looks like tie-dye. It's like pink, and the coloring, the actual pink, deeper pinkness is kind of saturated around the outside of the rose or the edges of the petals. And the final one that we have 6 Myra Peach Garden Roses. So these guys are a little bit smaller and they're more like an intense coral color. So we'll pull those guys out now. Because we have more of the myras, I'm going to kind of separate them out and spread them first, so that I don't end up having one side that has a ton of this one particular type of color. I really want to make sure that it's kind of spread evenly. So the first thing I'm going to do is begin by plucking off the leaves on the myras. They don't have any thorns, which is wonderful. I'm also going to remove my guard petals. So that's anything around the outside of the rose that may be bruised or torn. They protect the rose as it's developing from the moment that it's like a little bud to when it's fully developed. You can see I gave the head of my flower a puff of fresh air, and that warm air helps to kind of accelerate the opening a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and just remove the leaves and guard petals on these guys now, and then we'll begin to add them in. All right, so these guys are really, really pretty. I want to first introduce a couple of them up top in my design. So kind of similarly to where I put one of my mini green kind of up top in my design, I want to have 2 roses kind of up top. So I'm going to hold my rose up where I might like it to be. So I am not picking a certain side that I want it to be on. I've literally just looked to see where there's less going on, and it happens to be on this side of the design. I'll turn it all the way around. So at this point, it does not matter where it's going, just somewhere up top in the design. And then I'm going to put another one alongside that first one. So just to show you placement, I will turn my arrangement so you can see that I kind of just put them nearby each other. All right, so I have a cluster up top on this side. I'm going to counter that by doing 2 roses on this side a little bit lower. So over here, holding my rose about halfway up the design. And I'm going to slide this guy in here. And then another one below that, like so. Okay. And then if you turn your arrangement all the way around, you should have one side where there's not really much of this color represented. And I'm going to do the same where I'm starting with one about halfway down. And then my final rose, I will snuggle in nearby that first. There we go. All right, so if I give my guy a nice little rotation, you can see that now we have some of those peach myras on each side. Next up, I'm going to add my Juliets because that's the one I have the next most of. So for these guys, you're going to notice that there are thorns. So we'll begin by removing the leaves, any guard petals, and then the final step will be to remove your thorns. So there's a couple ways that you can remove these thorns. You can either take a knife, like I am, a sharp kitchen knife is just fine, and you can kind of just shave them off. You could use your clippers and snip them off. Or if you don't have either of those, you can just kind of push on the side of the thorn with your finger and they'll just break off. I prefer the knife method. It tends to be the quickest, so that's how I will normally remove my thorns. So we'll go ahead and remove our thorns from each of our Juliets, the peach one. Okay, so I'm going to begin by taking one of my Juliets, and I think I want to cluster it alongside my two top myras. So those two roses that are up top, I'm going to add this one into that cluster so I can hold my rose up like so, give him a nice cut, and then got him snuggled up beside my two myras. So you can notice, maybe you can't see it in the video, but my myras are alongside each other. I had my Juliet lie a little bit farther out, so I didn't push the rose quite as far in. These guys will really, really, really open up if you give them space. So I'm just giving him some space, leaving him a little bit farther out, anticipating that he's going to continue to open up and get really large and intense. All right, so for my second Juliet, I am going to pick either one of my next groupings of myras, and I'm going to have that Juliet snuggled up besides one of the other two groupings. So it doesn't matter which one for right now. And again, I'm leaving him a little bit farther out so that there's more room for him to open up. Then my last Juliet will be a designer's choice. My recommendation will be to pick a place on the arrangement where maybe you don't have as much color. So I have this little area over here that doesn't have much going on. So I'm thinking about placing my last Juliet over here to break up some of that white hydrangea and to introduce a little bit of color there. There we go. All right. So now I have just a few garden roses left behind. Our next one that I'm going to work with is our Constance. So we only have one of this guy. So because of that, I want to make sure that he has a really beautiful focal place up top to put him. So I'm just removing my guard petals. Can give him a nice pop of air. That will help open it a little. And then I'm going to pick a place up top in my arrangement, a nice focal center piece or area where it can really shine and flourish. So I have a lot of color on this side of the top of my design. On this side, I don't have much color. So I'm going to put him up top on this side of my design. So I'll get him in and then I will kind of turn so you guys can see my placement. So just kind of sitting up top, again, going to open a lot. So I've left him a little farther out of my hydrangea so that he can really start to unfold. Okay, so with our Patience garden rose, we'll remove the leaves. You may have thorns, just be careful if you do. Go ahead and just strip those away. Going to remove any guard petals, and then because I have two of these, I'm going to do one up top somewhere and then one a little bit farther down somewhere. So my recommendation here would be to pick a place up top where you don't have many roses thus far. For me, I don't have many on this side of my design. So my first Patience, I'm going to pop in up here. And then because I have him up here on this side, I want to counter that by having my second rose farther down on the opposite side. So this Patience, I've popped in over here, right here. All right, so next up I'm going to play with my stalk. So your stalk, you should have 4 of them in the bucket, which is a great number. This is a beautiful apricot colored stalk. I absolutely love this. It has a beautiful scent to it if you give it a sniff. I'm going to begin by removing the leaves on the stems. So this is what we call a line flower. It's very linear. You can kind of position it in lots of different ways and it's not going to kind of fall over. So great to always have some line flowers in your design. We will begin by, I'm just going to take my first piece of stock. Tons of floral here. I'm going to take away probably the bottom 3 to 4 blooms just to make it less aggressive. And this first piece of stock, just choose a place on the design where you have less going on. So I have a big ton of white over here and I want to kind of break that up a little bit by adding some color. And I'm going to get one stalk kind of sticking out of the top of my design as an asymmetrical element coming out over here. So when I say sticking out, I want what's left of my floral to kind of rest above the hydrangea, but you don't need to like stick it out up here where you have a ton of exposed stem lying outside. So I'm going to hold my stem up. Again, you can see it's cocked off to one side rather than going straight up and down in the arrangement. We can give our stem a nice little cut, and then I'm going to sneak this guy in here. So he's peeking out here. So because I have many of the stalks, I want to, my second piece of stalk, I just removed maybe 2 or 3 blooms off the bottom, and I'm gonna nestle him alongside that first one. So this one's up here. My next one, I'm gonna kind of have it be partners over here, coming out, but a little bit farther down. So this guy looks like this. To give you as a backdrop, I have one kind of coming out here and then one coming out right there. My second 2, so I have a nice asymmetrical thing happening over here. I want to counter that by doing some of my other pieces a little bit lower. So look, at this point, look for somewhere where you don't have as much color. So for me, I have a white rose in here, but other than that, I don't have much color at all. So I'm going to get my third piece of stock right in there to help introduce some color. And then the last piece will be a designer's choice. So anywhere where you feel like you are lacking color, you could use a little something. Maybe you have a hole somewhere. I'm just gonna kind of pop my last one over here. Beautiful. All right, next up, we are going to pop in our hellebore. So we have one piece today. This is a really fun flower. Comes in season during the winter. So you'll notice that will start to pop up, especially if you live in Old Town. Lots of people have it. So it's really beautiful. It has kind of this nice bell shape to the flowers themselves. And a really nice pastel green. If you have any huge overwhelming leaves, I'm just gonna go ahead and pop that off to make it easier to get into the base. And then because I only have one of these guys, I want to have him kind of high up as a focal element. I have my asymmetrical spray of stock on this side of the design, so I think I want to add some interest over here on this side with my hellebore. So just cut my stem a little bit, and you can see that when I get this guy in over here that I'm letting him be a little bit farther out of the design so that you can kind of see the movement of the blooms. So you don't want to like compress it in where then you've lost kind of the beautiful movement and the nice curves to the actual stem. So I've got this guy over here. And then my last element is one of my absolute favorite. These are Parasol spray roses. So they are a garden spray. They look really different than a traditional spray rose. There's tons and tons and tons more petals. This particular variety is such a pretty like sherbet color. So I'm going to begin by removing the leaves and then any guard petals. So similar to our full-size roses, the spray roses will also have guard petals. So I'm just kind of popping off anything along the outside of the flower that may be bruised or not quite perfect. So that's generally one of the ways that you could easily tell the difference between a garden rose and a traditional rose. First of which is the pattern of the petals. So with your garden roses, you tend to have many, many, many more petals. With the garden rose, you tend to have a different pattern in the way the petals kind of form. So the traditional rose that you may be familiar with has more of like a bullet-like shape to it versus your garden roses, which are more rounded and have more of like a cabbage-like interior to the rose. And then generally speaking, your roses that are of the garden variety are going to be scented or have smell to them versus your traditional roses, which usually do not have smell. So this parasol variety in particular tends to have this really, really crazy floral smell to it. So definitely take a whiff of these guys because they're really special and unique in that way. So with these spray roses, I'm just going to pop them in anywhere where I have holes. But because I only have 2, I definitely, again, want to follow that rule of kind of putting one up top in our design somewhere and then putting one a little bit farther down on the opposite side. So for my first spray, I kind of popped them in up here. So I'm going to counter that by popping my second spray in on the other side a little bit lower. So for me, that is right around here. So these smaller roses look really nice paired alongside your full-size roses. So there's a difference in kind of the size of the roses itself. And it makes it look a little bit less like spotty. All right, so at this point, I'm just going to revisit with some of this greenery that I have left behind. And then anywhere where I'm not seeing any of this pittosporum, I'm just gonna pop some in and then make sure that it's kind of represented throughout our design. So maybe you have some spaces around the bottom where your full-size hydrangea just covered it up. Maybe you can't see any more of it like up top in your arrangement, and maybe you want to pop a piece or two in some higher places where your greens have been covered. And then definitely you can also add some of that darker green foliage as well if you have spaces where it feels less interesting, or maybe there's not quite as much going on, or maybe there's an actual gap in your arrangement. So just kind of revisiting placement of greenery, making sure that you can still see it all over my design. That would be the goal. All right, so I love this piece. Definitely something I would display in my own house. So I think this is a really fun kind of creeping us into spring with some of those brighter pastels. So definitely find a place where you can display this in your house. Great places would be anywhere that's away from direct sunlight. So you can definitely put it in a room that's getting sunlight. Just don't put it in a sunny windowsill or somewhere where the sun is like beating on the arrangement itself. You're going to want to keep it away from drafting heat. So definitely just don't put it next to a heat vent. But other than that, doesn't need to be refrigerated or anything. And then, yeah, that's it. You're going to want to add water to your arrangement. We've got some full-size hydrangea in here, which tend to be very thirsty. So just be careful. Make sure that you're adding about half a cup of water to your arrangement every 2 days or so. Let's see, it's Wednesday today, so Friday, maybe add a half a cup of water to your arrangement. I usually will just take a measuring cup and kind of pour it into the top of my arrangement, although you could certainly use like a watering can or a turkey baster, or even just take your arrangement and put it under your kitchen sink. And yeah, that's it. We have so many classes up on the website. We were just brainstorming today about classes that we want to offer this summer. So we have some really fun ideas about subjects that we want to teach in the summer months. So keep an eye out for those. But all of our classes from late winter to early spring are already up on the website. So highly recommend checking those out if you've enjoyed class and want to keep developing your skills, or you just want to keep having fresh flowers that you can enjoy in your home. We will see you again soon.